We all know that people often present themselves as confident and self-assured, but beneath the surface, many of us use relationships as a twisted form of emotional exposure therapy, intentionally walking into situations that push our boundaries and test our defenses. This masochistic pattern, often masked by a veneer of strength, stems from a deep-seated desire to confront the parts of ourselves we'd rather keep hidden, and to prove to others and ourselves that we're worthy of love and connection despite our deep-seated flaws. If you've ever noticed how your friends or loved ones tend to attract toxic partners or engage in self-destructive behaviors, you're not alone. I've seen this pattern play out in my own relationships time and time again, and it's a painful lesson in the blurred lines between strength and vulnerability. In this video, I'll take you on a journey into the dark corners of human psychology, where we'll explore the insidious duality of power and vulnerability, and uncover the hidden patterns that keep us locked in a cycle of self-destruction. When we enter into relationships, our deepest desires often disguise themselves as an insatiable need for validation, a craving that drives us to seek reflections of ourselves in the eyes of others. We're drawn to people who mirror our strengths, who amplify our best qualities, because deep down, we're desperate to affirm the sense of self-worth that we've been trying to fabricate throughout our lives. But the opposite is also true. We're just as drawn to those who expose our insecurities, who challenge us to confront the vulnerabilities that we've worked so hard to conceal from the world. In our pursuit of relationships, we often use others as a means to escape the painful truths about ourselves, to deflect from the crushing realization that our deepest insecurities are what drive us to seek connection in the first place. The truth is, we're not as attracted to people as we are to the idea of ourselves through them. The projection of our desires, our hopes, our fears onto someone else's face is an attempt to momentarily stave off the existential dread of being alone with our own insecurities. We use relationships as a form of self-deception, a way to convince ourselves that we're worthy, that we're lovable, that we're enough, when in reality, we're just trying to momentarily silence the screaming voice of our own self-doubt. When we seek power in relationships, we're often attempting to fill the void left by our inability to confront our deepest insecurities within ourselves, creating a facade of empowerment that's actually a desperate cry for validation. Our seemingly empowering assertions can be nothing more than a carefully crafted attempt to deflect from the insecurities and vulnerabilities we desperately try to conceal, revealing a paradoxical dance of power and submission. By idealizing a partner or relationship, we're unconsciously attempting to recreate the conditions that led to our earliest experiences of attachment and validation, thereby perpetuating a cycle of dependence and fear. In reality, our pursuit of dominance and control in relationships is often rooted in a deep-seated fear of being out of control and vulnerable ourselves, forcing us to engage in a perpetual balancing act between exposure and concealment. It's intriguing to note that our tendency to be drawn to individuals who embody the characteristics we lack or fear within ourselves is actually an attempt to externalize those qualities, effectively bypassing our self-awareness and leaving us more entrenched in our insecurities. Ultimately, the dichotomy between power and vulnerability is not a linear struggle, but rather a fluid dynamic that ebbs and flows in tandem with our self-perception, requiring us to confront the darker corners of our psyche in order to transcend the insidious duality of empowerment and submission. People often use vulnerability as a tactic to draw others in, to make them feel invested in their insecurities, and this can be a clever way to test the waters and see if someone is genuinely interested in confronting and understanding the depths of our pain. We are drawn to others who can see beyond our carefully curated facades and still manage to like us, who can tolerate our shadows without turning away in disgust, and this can be a powerful validation, a stamp of approval that our worthiness isn't entirely dependent on our ability to project perfection. However, the same people who crave this kind of validation are often simultaneously terrified of being seen, of being vulnerable, because they are convinced that it will expose their deepest insecurities and leave them utterly exposed and helpless. What we frequently forget is that our attempts to conceal our insecurities are often the very thing that draws people in. That creates an attraction, because it speaks to a deep desire to connect, to be seen and understood, even if it's just in the context of our mutual flaws and vulnerabilities. But when we're unable to confront our own shadows, we often project them onto others, and this can lead to a pattern of behavior where we attract people who are only too happy to play the role of the shadow self, to represent the repressed aspects of our own psyche. The pursuit of power and control can be a desperate attempt to overcome feelings of inadequacy and insecurity. But in the end, it's often just another form of self-deception, a way of convincing ourselves that we're more powerful than we actually are, that we're not as vulnerable as we feel. When we form a close relationship, we expose ourselves to the risk of being truly seen, and it's in this gaze that our insecurities are revealed, often more accurately than we'd care to admit. We crave intimacy and validation as a means of proving to ourselves and others that our worth is tangible. But this quest for validation often stems from a deep-seated insecurity, an insidious nagging voice that we're somehow fundamentally flawed. We're attracted to the people who challenge us because they provide a distorted echo of our own insecurities. Our attraction is an unconscious attempt to understand and address these vulnerabilities. The drive for control in a relationship is often a covert attempt to deflect the terror of being out of control oneself, to momentarily suspend the anxiety of being utterly dependent on forces beyond one's grasp. Intimacy can be a shield, as we hide behind the masks of vulnerability and openness, using our closest relationships as a means of protecting ourselves from the crushing vulnerability of being alone, of truly being ourselves. In the moment of confrontation, when our partner reflects the darkest corners of our psyche back at us, we're forced to confront the stark realization that our self-image is a thin facade, a house of cards precariously balanced on the shifting sands of our ego. Here are 6 insightful spoken sentences tailored for the given video section. When we seek validation through someone else, we inadvertently invite them to wield the power of our deepest insecurities, making us hostage to the very emotions we attempt to hide. Our insecurities aren't flaws to be ashamed of, but rather raw exposures of our true desires, which we often attempt to mask with the masquerade of confidence. The pursuit of control and dominance can be a desperate attempt to conceal our own feelings of powerlessness, and in the intricate dance of relationships, one partner's need for control often mirrors the other's fear of being controlled. People are drawn to the vulnerabilities of others not because they are repelled by our flaws, but because they are drawn to the authenticity of our fears, and the more we try to conceal them, the more we inadvertently broadcast our most profound insecurities. Egotistical pursuits of power and validation are rooted in our insecurities, but ironically, embracing these insecurities can be a liberating experience that sets us free from the need to constantly prove ourselves to others. As we peel away the layers of self-deception and societal expectations, we're left with the unbridled truth that our greatest insecurities are not weaknesses to be overcome, but rather the underlying drivers of our most profound attractions and relationships. Thank you for joining me on this complex exploration of power and vulnerability in relationships. I hope you've gained a deeper understanding of how people use these dynamics to confront and conceal their insecurities, and I invite you to reflect on your own experiences in light of this insight. If you found this analysis thought-provoking, please like and comment with your observations, and for more in-depth explorations of human psychology, be sure to subscribe.